Smoke covered the pale sky like a torn blanket and the ground shook again as another beam burned a long black line across the hill. He stood in the doorway of the shelter with ash on his cheeks and listened to the city scream. He was young for a builder and old for a runner. His skin held a faint glow that marked his people, and his eyes, wide and wet, watched the towers fall one by one. The invaders came without a banner, without a voice. Only the cold rhythm of machines and the hot thunder of weapons. They did not ask for surrender. They did not take prisoners. They only cut and burned and moved forward. Inside the shelter, mothers pressed hands over mouths to keep children quiet. Elders stared at the ceiling and remembered old stories. The ones about a distant blue world where strong people lived. Some said those people healed. Some said those people fought. No one knew the truth. The council had told everyone to hope for peace and hide. But hope was thin inside the dust. The young builder stepped back into the tunnel and followed the cables that ran along the wall. He could feel the hum of the relay hidden beneath the stone. There was still power. There was still a chance to speak to the sky. When he reached the broadcast room, he found 4 others there already. An elder with silver lines on her brow. A messenger whose arm was wrapped in a dirty bandage. A quiet singer who once guided festivals in the valley. And a pilot with a broken wing frame clamped to his spine. They turned to him as the shelter shook again. The elder said in a steady voice that could calm storms, "We will send the cry now." And the singer nodded and pressed her lips together as if holding a prayer inside. The pilot checked the board. Lights flickered. One by one they steadied. Green for the long-range dish. Green for the pulse engine. Yellow for the translator because some phrases would be lost. Still, they would try. The messenger looked at the young builder and asked for his hands. They tied the last cable to the spine of the console, and the elder told the singer to begin. She stood before the recorder and breathed in dust. When she spoke, her voice was soft and clear. "We speak to anyone who can hear. We speak to the kind. We speak to the brave. We speak to healers. Our cities burn. Our gardens are ash. Our rivers boil. We have no army left. Our ships are broken and our shields are thin. We will welcome medicine. We will welcome shelter. We will welcome anyone who will. Stand with us between the fire and the children." The translator turned her words into 100 tongues. The signal rose like a thin silver thread into the wounded sky and then into the upper dark where old myths sleep. The elder added steady words like stones. "This is not a trap. This is not a test. We are not soldiers. We are farmers and singers and keepers of soil. Please help us." The invaders cut the north quarter at that moment and the wall behind them cracked. Dust rained over the board. The pilot shouted that the dish was holding but the heat was rising on the relay and they must shorten the message or the whole system would melt. The elder gave a short nod. Then she looked to the young builder. "You know the old story," she said, "the one about the death world and the people who walked in storms." He knew it the way every child knew it, told at fires and whispered to calm bad dreams. It said the blue world was full of iron mountains and beasts with teeth like knives. It said the people there became strong because the world tried to break them. It said they healed their own with hands like machines and protected their young with eyes like knives. It said they had a word for home that meant we do not bow. He told the elder he knew it. The elder said, "Then add that word to the message," and the translator stuttered. It did not have that word. But the singer did not wait for perfection. She spoke again. "We ask the world of storms for mercy. We ask the strong for help. We ask the hands that heal to come quickly." A new tremor rolled under their feet. The pilot warned that the rooftop array was cooking. If it failed, the cry would die. The messenger stepped toward the ladder that led up through the vent shaft. "I will cool the fins," he said. "No," said the elder. But he climbed anyway. He was fast for a man with a torn arm. The young builder ran after him and together they pushed open the round hatch. Hot air rushed their faces. The sky was purple with smoke and bright with falling metal. The fins above the dish glowed dull red. The builder took a bucket and threw grey water from the tank. It hissed and rose like a ghost. Below them the singer kept speaking. She told the dark how they used to plant songs with seeds so the children would remember the names of trees. She told the dark how the invaders cut those trees and broke the names. She told the dark how the wind itself sounded like crying now. The translator wavered, trying to keep up as the beam spilled into bands that could reach far, farther than hope usually goes. The messenger laughed once, a little mad with fear, and said, "Someone will hear, even if they do not understand. Someone will hear that we ask for mercy." A shadow moved across the smoke and both men froze. It was one of the invader drones. A sleek thing with no face, only sharp angles and a red eye. It drew a line toward them. The builder pulled the messenger down and the line sliced the air where his head had been. The Hatch slammed. The line cut a groove through the metal but did not pierce. The builder threw the bolt. His hands shook but he held. The messenger panted and pressed his forehead to the cool pipe. Below, the elder kept her voice calm. Keep speaking, she told the singer. The drone beat against the hatch like a flat fist. And then it moved away, perhaps to hunt easier prey, in the room. The pilot swept a hand over the board. The dish shook but the signal held. The elder finally took her place at the recorder. This is for the ones who can choose to come, she said. If you are kind, bring medicine. If you are brave, bring a shield. If you are both, bring your whole heart. The console clicked. The translator grabbed old words from old files and wrapped them around her plea. Far above, the beam leapt across empty distances. It passed the dead relay of a mining outpost and touched the ice rings of a silent world. It reached a listening post that did not fly a flag. A machine there woke and turned. It sent a copy forward, deeper, into lanes of traffic and gossip and coded markets. The cry crossed paths with a patrol that had no name. Men and women inside looked up. The strong word for home touched their ears. One of them frowned. The signal kept running. It found a station near a blue sun where a quiet watcher kept records and remembered old promises. It found the edge of a map where the paper was blank because the cartographers were afraid to draw. In the shelter, the singer's voice finally broke and she leaned on the console. The elder put a hand on her shoulder and spoke the last words the translator could carry. We will not survive the night without help. Please, the board flashed, the dish screamed. The pilot yanked a lever and shut the power an instant before the array burned through. The room fell quiet except for shallow breathing and the distant sound of buildings settling into rubble. The messenger laughed again and then swallowed it like a bad taste. Now we wait, he said, and the elder nodded. We wait, in the long tunnel. Families listened to the shaking above and the faraway drum of machines. A child asked, will the healers come? The mother kissed the child's head and said yes because she had to. The young builder sat near the door with a small tool in his hands and felt the weight of what they had done. He remembered the story's other part that people did not tell to children. The part that said the storm world did not come with gentle steps. The part that said the storm world answered threats with iron. He pushed that thought aside and told himself that healers would come first and carry soft light. In the morning if there was a morning, the pilot whispered that if anyone heard, response would still take time. Many jumps, many hours. The elder said time is a chain and we hold the last link. And she closed her eyes for a moment as if speaking to someone far away. Night fell. Though the sky still glowed with fires. At the edge of the city near a broken river. For invader walkers stopped as if listening to a signal of their own. Then they turned their heads toward the hills and began to move. The shelter door shivered when they passed. Their weight pressed memory into the soil. Inside the broadcast room, the console blinked once, twice. A faint chirp like a heartbeat rolled across the board. The pilot leaned close. He did not breathe. The chirp came again. The translator woke on a low setting and tried to lift its head. The screen displayed a line of symbols that did not belong to any trade net the elder knew. Simple marks, efficient, sharp like cut metal. The elder felt a small cold river run down her spine. The pilot said, I think someone spoke back. The young builder looked at the screen and then at the elder and then at the hatch above their heads where the drone had carved a shallow scar. The singer wiped dust from her face and stood straight again. What does it say? She asked. The translator struggled and offered a fragment. It is not a greeting, the pilot whispered, not a promise of medicine. It is a question. The elder took a slow breath, read the symbols again, and answered in a voice that stayed level though her hands shook. She spoke to the recorder, to the sky, to the thing that had spoken from beyond their fear. We are civilians. We are hurt. We need aid. We need shelter. Please help us. The screen pulsed. Another line appeared. The translator gave a rough meaning, location confirmed, hold position. More lines came, tight, clipped. The pilot said the pattern was military. Not a trader, not a missionary, military. The elder closed her eyes for a count of 3 and then opened them and put steel into her voice. If it was a soldier, then perhaps a shield would indeed arrive. She told the singer to send the coordinates again and to say the children were below ground and the air filters would fail by dawn. The drone returned and scraped the hatch again. And again it left. The invader walkers climbed the hill and stopped at the old tower with the broken bells. They stood like black trees watching the town. The young builder held his tool like a knife and thought of the blue world and the word for home. He wondered what kind of people owned a word like that. He wondered if mercy and iron could live in the same hand. The console chirped a final time and then fell still. The elder said, "It is enough, now we hide," and they turned off the last light. The shelter breathed in the dark. Somewhere, between the fire and the sky, the cry of a small people traveled through maps and laws and quiet anger, and far away, beyond their knowing, something vast listened, considered, and began to move. The night stretched long and heavy inside the shelter. No one slept, though some closed their eyes. The air filters groaned and spat dust. The children coughed in shallow breaths. Above ground the firelight painted the sky red and orange like a wound that never closed. The young builder sat near the cracked door and felt each vibration run through the metal. The elder remained by the silent console with her hand resting on the dead lights as if touching it. Might bring back the voice that had answered. The pilot dozed against the wall, but his eyes snapped open at every distant rumble. When morning finally came, it did not bring light but more smoke and the bitter smell of burned stone. The invaders marched steadily in the distance, their tall machines scanning every ruin. One moved toward the hills but turned away as if some other order pulled it back. The messenger returned from the vent with black soot all over his face. He whispered that the streets above were empty except for drifting ash. He had seen no survivors, only shadows moving like hunters. The elder nodded and told him not to go out again. They had to wait. The waiting burned worse than the fire. Each moment the people asked themselves if the message had crossed the void or if it had fallen into silence. The young builder remembered the cold words on the screen: location confirmed, hold position. He repeated them in his mind again and again. Were they a promise or a warning? The singer tried to raise spirits. She hummed softly in the corner, a melody once used to guide seed planting in spring. The sound carried fragile hope but could not hide the fear beneath. Hours passed. The ground shook once, then again, this time sharper. The pilot rose and checked the wall. These were not invader steps, he said. They were heavier, slower, deeper. The elder frowned. The messenger pressed his ear to the stone. The sound grew. It came not from the city but from the sky. Outside, clouds parted and shadows covered the ruins. Shapes moved above the smoke, enormous shapes, sharp-edged with light burning under their hulls. The aliens in the shelter froze, every chest tight. Was this the end or the answer? The elder pressed a trembling hand to the console, though it was still dead. The pilot whispered in disbelief. Those are not invader craft. Too large, too many. Their engines sounded like rolling thunder. The young builder pushed the hatch open just a crack and blinding blue light poured through. He saw steel stretching across the heavens, a formation of ships darker than the void yet glowing with weapons ready. The banner of the storm world had arrived, not healers, not gentle saviors, but warships, vast and endless. The elder's breath caught as realization struck. They had not called kindness, they had called humanity, and humanity had answered not with aid but with an entire fleet. Outside, the sky filled with the iron of Deathwelders, and the aliens, who had begged for mercy, now trembled at the storm they had summoned. The first roar shook the entire valley as the human fleet cut through the upper sky. The invader machines paused mid-march, their red eyes blinking as if sensing a new predator had entered the hunt. The people in the shelter clung to one another, their ears filled with the deep rumble of engines that did not belong to mercy. The young builder pressed his face to the hatch and watched as the smoke parted to reveal lines of black steel ships stretching farther than his eyes could count, each one bristling with weapons that glowed with deadly promise. The messenger whispered that no healer carried such fire. The elder said nothing, her lips pressed thin as stone. Above, streaks of light lanced downward. The first salvos fired from orbit. The ground cracked as towers of flame rose where invader walkers had once stood. The earth shook so violently that dust rained from the ceiling of the shelter. Children screamed and mothers pulled them close. Outside, the invaders turned their weapons skyward, but the beams that once burned cities now fizzled against layered shields of human warships. The difference in power was terrifying. The humans did not land slowly with open arms. They descended like thunderbolts, steel bodies piercing the clouds and disgorging ranks of armored soldiers whose very footsteps rang like hammers on the broken ground. The pilot gasped at the sight of dropships forming dark swarms. He muttered that no small people could have imagined such scale. The singer trembled as she realized her prayer for healers had brought soldiers, men and women in dark suits, their eyes hidden behind glowing visors, their weapons alive with energy. They moved without hesitation, efficient and cold. Their first shots tore through invader lines as if cutting paper. Screams of metal filled the ruined streets. The elder finally spoke, her voice low and hard. These are not saviors. These are Deathwelders. They came to end, not to mend. The young builder's heart pounded. Part of him wanted to cheer because the invaders were finally falling, yet another part froze with dread. What kind of price would such power demand? Outside, the sky itself seemed to burn. Fleets of warships arranged in perfect formation. Their silhouettes like a wall between stars and soil. The invaders who once felt unstoppable now scattered like frightened beasts. But the people in the shelter knew this was not kindness arriving, it was judgment. And humanity had chosen to answer their cry. With war, the ground shook with every strike as the battle above turned the sky into fire. The aliens in the shelter could hardly breathe. Smoke pressed through the cracks and the sound of thunder rolled without pause. The young builder tried to keep the hatch closed, but light from explosions still poured in like flashing knives. Outside, the city was no longer a city, only ruins lit by the clash of invader machines and human warships. The invaders fought desperately, their walkers firing red beams in every direction, but the human shields absorbed the attacks with ease, and when the humans answered, their weapons cut through entire streets in a single sweep. The messenger pressed his face into his hands and whispered that this was not rescue but annihilation. The singer held the hand of a child and tried to sing again, but her voice broke under the endless roar. The elder stood silently at the console, her eyes closed, listening to the rhythm of destruction. She had lived long enough to know the sound of armies and the sound of storms, and this was both. Above them, one warship tilted and released a cascade of burning lances, each one spearing an invader craft from the sky. The wreckage fell like flaming rain, crushing towers that had already half collapsed. The pilot muttered that the humans moved with precision beyond anything he had seen. Their formations were perfect, their strikes deliberate, no wasted shot, no hesitation. He wondered aloud if they even cared who lived below as long as their enemy was destroyed. The builder clenched his fists. Part of him wanted to rush out and cheer. Part of him wanted to stay buried, because in the faces of those ships he saw no warmth, only cold power. Hours passed like minutes. The battle stretched across the horizon. Wave after wave of invader craft was torn apart until the sky was littered with falling debris. Entire districts vanished in firestorms as human artillery hammered the ground. Families in the shelter covered their ears, children cried until their voices cracked, and still the fleet pressed forward, never slowing, never speaking a word of comfort. When the invader lines finally broke, their machines fleeing into the smoke, the sky did not grow calm. Instead, more human ships arrived, heavier, larger, like mountains of iron drifting down from the stars. They formed a wall around the planet, sealing every path of escape. The messenger whispered that this was not aid. This was occupation. The elder finally opened her eyes and spoke. They came because we begged, and now we will live with what we called. The builder asked in a low voice what she meant, but she did not answer. Above the shelter, boots struck the broken ground, heavy and deliberate. The sound of human soldiers sweeping through the ruins, their visors glowing like burning coals, their voices sharp and clipped, giving orders in a language the translator struggled to catch. One phrase came clear again and again. Secure the area, secure the survivors. The singer's face lit with brief hope at the word survivors, but the pilot shook his head. Secure did not sound like comfort. It sounded like control. The hatch rattled once. Shadows fell across the crack. The builder held his breath. Footsteps passed. Then another rumble shook the walls as a dropship settled close by, its engines screaming like beasts chained to stone. The elder placed her hand over the console and whispered that the storm had answered. But storms did not heal, they only swept away whatever was weak. The people of the shelter sat in silence, hearts torn between relief that the invaders were gone and terror at the new giants who now ruled their sky. The war was not finished, it had only shifted. And in that long dark hour they all understood that humanity had come not as saviors but as conquerors cloaked in fire. The silence after the battle was not true silence. It was filled with the groan of shattered towers, the crackle of endless fires, and the steady march of heavy boots on broken stone. The survivors inside the shelter sat together with hollow eyes, each breath tasting of smoke and metal. The young builder could not stop thinking of the moment the sky split open and ships larger than mountains had descended. He still felt the vibration in his bones. The messenger leaned against the wall, his bandaged arm trembling as he whispered that they had called for healers but called down judgment instead. The elder told him to rest his voice, for words had weight and the air was already heavy with fear. Above them the hatch rang once as a soldier's boot struck it. Shadows passed and strange voices echoed. They were deep and sharp, filled with authority. The translator on the console flickered weakly and caught fragments. Secure civilians, establish perimeter, cleanse hostiles. None of the words carried warmth, all were cold instructions. The singer clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders. She whispered that perhaps cleansing meant protecting, perhaps securing meant saving. Her hope was thin, but she held it like a dying ember. The pilot shook his head slowly and said that armies did not protect without purpose. They occupied, they controlled. He had flown in many battles before the invaders broke his wing frame, and he knew the sound of victors who looked upon the defeated. Outside, the rumble of engines rolled again as more dropships landed, their metal bodies groaning under weight. Soldiers poured out in endless streams, lines of armored figures with glowing visors sweeping every street, their weapons always raised, scanning shadows as if everything in sight was a possible threat. The builder opened the hatch a finger's width. Light poured through so bright it hurt. He saw the outline of soldiers moving in formation, their steps in perfect rhythm, their weapons humming, their helmets reflecting the fire of burning ruins. The sight made his chest heavy. He wanted to believe these were saviors, but in his heart he felt the cold distance of their march. Suddenly a deep horn-like sound echoed through the city, not from the invaders, not from the survivors, but from the warships themselves, a signal across the ruined land. All the soldiers froze for a moment, then moved with renewed urgency. One squad approached the rubble of the northern quarter, lifting blocks of stone with machines as if searching beneath. Cries rose faint and muffled, survivors buried in the wreckage. The humans pulled them out quickly, but the way they held them was not gentle. It was clinical, checking their bodies like objects, scanning them with beams of light, then dragging them to waiting transports. The elder watched through the crack with a face carved from stone. She whispered that humanity had come to save, but their kind of saving was different. The messenger asked if this was better than dying under the invaders, and the elder said only time would answer. Suddenly heavy boots stopped right outside the hatch. The builder froze, his breath caught in his chest. The metal handle rattled. A hand in a black glove pulled at the lock. The elder raised her hand, motioning for silence. The hatch groaned but held. After a moment the boots moved away. Orders were shouted. More survivors dragged from ruins. Engines roared as transports lifted into the smoke. The pilot whispered that they were gathering every living soul. Not asking, not explaining, just gathering. The singer trembled, her voice breaking as she said, maybe they will take us to safety. Maybe their ships have food, air, medicine. Maybe this is the kindness of storm people. The elder shook her head. Kindness did not walk with guns drawn. Kindness did not seal the skies with fleets. The builder's heart twisted, because he wanted to believe the singer yet feared the elder was right. Hours passed as the humans swept the city. Nothing moved without their eyes finding it. The invaders who had survived were hunted and executed in the streets. No questions, no mercy. Each blast echoed like a warning to anyone who might resist. The survivors, pulled from rubble, huddled together in confusion, their eyes wide as they were herded into armored transports. Above them the sky was filled with warships arranged like teeth of a great beast, their engines glowing cold blue. The elder finally spoke to the others in the shelter. She said, we will be found soon. And when that moment comes we must choose whether to walk into their arms or remain hidden in the ashes. No one answered. The choice was too heavy. The builder closed the hatch again, pressing his back against it as the sound of soldiers came closer, and he wondered if they had truly been saved or simply replaced one master with another. The cries for help had been answered, but the answer was a fleet, and now the storm walked their streets. The shelter walls trembled as another transport rose into the smoke-filled sky, its engines leaving behind a trail of burning dust. The survivors inside felt the weight of every sound, each thud of boots above them, each metallic voice echoing through the ruins. The young builder sat with his back against the hatch, his hands shaking though he tried to hide it. He could hear soldiers speaking in a sharp-clipped tone, the translator catching fragments. Survivors secured, perimeter stable, resistance eliminated. The words carried no comfort, only finality. The messenger whispered that they were being catalogued like objects. The singer clung to a child and murmured that perhaps being secured meant being safe. The elder raised her hand and told everyone to stay silent. She had lived long enough to know that armies did not come without cost, and the cost was rarely spoken until it was too late. Outside, the sound of machinery grew louder. Massive human walkers moved through the streets, their steel legs crushing stone like brittle leaves. Scanners swept across the ruins with beams of pale light. Any movement triggered a squad of soldiers, efficient and merciless. They dragged the living from holes, checked them, and pushed them into lines, one by one. No questions. No explanations. The pilot leaned his head against the wall and whispered that he had seen armies occupy worlds before, but never with such precision. This was not rescue. This was control. The builder pressed his ear to the hatch and heard a new sound, the heavy grinding of metal against stone. When he peered through the crack, he saw soldiers marking the ruins with beacons, each beacon flashing a red pulse that connected to the skies above. Moments later, fire rained down, targeted blasts from orbit that vaporized invader wreckage and sterilized the ground. The humans were erasing every trace of the battle, not leaving ruins but clean scars. The messenger cursed under his breath. Their city was being rewritten. Their history burned along with the enemy. The elder whispered that the storm did not come to remember. It came to erase. Hours stretched into a blur of noise and ash. More survivors were pulled out, some crying, some silent. All herded into transports. The singer's hope grew thinner with every scream. Still she whispered that maybe inside those steel ships there would be food, maybe medicine. Maybe they would be taken to a safe place. Her words were fragile, almost broken. But no one else could bring themselves to speak against them. Suddenly the shelter shook hard. Dust rained from the ceiling. The builder thought the invaders had returned. But when he pushed the hatch open a sliver, he saw the truth. A human walker stood only meters away, its glowing scanner sweeping across the rubble. The beam passed over the hatch and paused. The builder's heart stopped. For one endless moment he thought the metal would be torn open. Then the beam moved on. The walker turned and walked away, its steps like thunder fading into the distance. The pilot whispered that their hiding would not last. Soon the scanners would find them. The elder nodded slowly and said, "Then we must be ready, ready to stand, ready to speak, ready to decide if we will call these warriors saviors or conquerors." Silence followed her words, each heart filled with fear. Outside, the sky thundered again as another wave of warships descended. Their shadows darkened the ruins completely, and for the first time the survivors understood that their cry for help had not just brought soldiers. It had summoned a force that could not be turned away. The fleet was here, and it would not leave. The storm had chosen their world. The next day did not feel like day at all. The sky remained black with smoke and the red glow of fires. The people in the shelter listened as the sound of order replaced the sound of chaos. No longer random blasts, no longer screams. Now it was the steady rhythm of soldiers moving in formation. Voices barking commands, engines lifting and landing, machines grinding. The invaders were gone, but the humans had filled every corner. The young builder pressed his face to the hatch again. This time he saw not battle but control. Rows of survivors marched through the ruins under armed escort. Their faces pale, their bodies weak, yet the soldiers treated them not as guests but as subjects, scanning their arms, tagging them with small glowing marks before loading them into transports. The messenger swore softly and said they were being numbered, not saved. The singer argued that maybe it was medicine. Maybe the glowing marks would help track who needed care. Her voice was hopeful, but her eyes were wet. The pilot shook his head. No army numbered the saved. Only the owned. The elder placed her hand on the console and spoke quietly. "This is the price of calling giants. They never walk away empty-handed." Outside, the humans raised tall structures of steel within hours. Command towers, weapon emplacements, landing pads. Their efficiency was frightening. The city that had once belonged to the weak race was no longer theirs. It was being rebuilt into a human fortress. One beacon after another climbed into the sky, linking with the fleet above, sealing the world under a net of iron. The builder felt both awe and dread as he watched ships the size of mountains hang above the clouds, their cannons glowing even at rest. The ground shook as orbital strikes continued to wipe out invader stragglers in the far valleys. The thunder never stopped. The messenger whispered that soon they would sweep this shelter too. The elder did not deny it. She said, "We cannot hide forever, and when they find us we must remember what we asked. We begged for help, and this is help in the language of storms." Her voice was calm but carried sorrow. Hours later the sound of boots grew near, heavier than before. Voices echoed closer. The builder gripped the hatch with both hands, his heart racing. Then came the sound of metal grinding, scanners sweeping. A bright light struck the crack in the hatch and the room filled with silence as everyone held their breath. The beam lingered, then passed, footsteps faded. For a brief moment relief filled the shelter. But then a deeper sound shook the earth, a horn from the sky, long and low. Ships above shifted in formation. Dropships descended in a swarm. The pilot whispered that this was not patrol. This was a gathering. The elder closed her eyes and said, "The moment has come." Soon they will open our door, and we must face what we summoned. The builder's stomach twisted. The singer clutched the child tighter. The messenger clenched his fists. Outside, the soldiers moved closer, and the survivors realized there was no more waiting. Humanity had found them, and whatever came next would decide if they lived as rescued people or as subjects of an empire born in fire. The hatch rattled hard this time, not from stray steps above but from deliberate force. Metal clanged as something heavy locked onto the outside. The young builder pressed himself against it, but his strength meant nothing against machines made of storm steel. A loud hiss filled the tunnel as the seal was cut. Sparks rained inside. Mothers clutched their children. The singer whispered prayers in broken notes. The messenger reached for a stone as if it were a weapon, though he knew it was useless. The pilot stood ready, but his broken frame trembled. Then the hatch tore open and light spilled into the shelter like a blade. Figures filled the doorway, tall, armored, their glowing visors hiding any trace of a face. Weapons raised not in anger but in the calm readiness of predators who expect no challenge. The elder stepped forward before anyone else could. Move, her hands raised, her voice steady. We are civilians, we begged for help. The soldiers did not reply in her language. They spoke to each other in sharp clipped tones. The translator flickered and gave fragments. Civilians confirmed, secure the group, transfer immediately. One soldier moved forward and scanned the elder. A beam of cold blue light washed over her. Her skin glowed faintly. Numbers appeared on the soldier's wrist plate. He nodded once and gestured to the others. More beams passed over every survivor, each person tagged and recorded. The singer clutched the child, but the soldier pulled the little one gently yet firmly from her arms. Scanned, then handed the child back. It was quick, efficient, without cruelty but also without compassion. The messenger tried to speak, asking where they were being taken. But the soldier's visor turned toward him in silence. Then the order came again, transfer, transfer. The humans herded the group toward the surface. The builder felt the heat of the fires on his face as he stepped outside for the first time since the cry had been sent. The city he knew was gone, every street leveled, every tower reduced to black bones. Above, the sky was filled edge to edge with ships, their shadows swallowing the light. Transports lined the square, survivors from other shelters already packed inside, their faces pale and confused. The soldiers guided them with steady movements, not cruel, not kind, only inevitable. The elder's eyes searched the fleet above. She whispered to the builder, "Remember this, remember what our begging has brought." The pilot muttered that their world was no longer theirs. It belonged to the ones who answered. The singer still tried to believe, her voice breaking as she said, "Perhaps they will heal us after all. Perhaps inside those ships is medicine and clean air." The messenger spat on the ground and said, "Or perhaps cages." One by one the survivors were loaded onto the transport. The builder looked back once at the ruins of his home. Smoke rising in thin streams like spirits drifting away. Then the hatch of the transport closed with a metallic thud. Inside the chamber was cold, the walls smooth and glowing faintly, rows of seats with restraints that snapped shut as soon as they sat. The soldiers stood at the ends, silent, their glowing visors reflecting the fear in alien eyes. The engines roared, lifting them into the sky. Through the small slits of windows the builder saw the fleet closer than ever. Endless steel, weapons pointed outward. No invaders remained, yet the fleet did not withdraw. It expanded, fortifying orbit. The storm had no intention of leaving. The elder whispered softly so only those closest could hear. "We called healers and we called warriors. But what came are rulers." The singer closed her eyes and held the child. The pilot gritted his teeth. The messenger cursed under his breath. And the builder stared out at the endless wall of warships and felt the weight of a truth he could not speak. Their cry for help had not been ignored. It had been answered completely, and now the storm owned their world. The transport shuddered as it pierced the smoke and climbed higher. The survivors inside pressed against their restraints, eyes wide as the ruined land fell away beneath them. The young builder leaned toward the narrow window and felt his breath catch. The surface of their world was a graveyard now, black scars stretching in every direction, glowing fires where cities once stood, and above it all hung the human fleet, endless rows of warships laid like teeth in the sky. The messenger muttered that no fleet like this came for mercy. Fleets like this came to claim. The singer whispered that maybe they needed such power to protect them. Maybe the humans feared the invaders returning. But her words sounded hollow even to herself. The elder sat with her hands folded, her face calm but her eyes carrying storms of their own. She said softly, "We thought we asked for kindness. But what answered was power. And power never gives without taking. The pilot grunted agreement. He had seen empires rise before, and he recognized the look of soldiers who saw not people but territory. The transport docked with a massive carrier ship, its belly wide as a mountain. The hatch opened and the survivors were marched out. The halls inside were cold, metallic, perfect. Machines whirred softly, soldiers lined the walls. Their weapons always ready though no threat was visible. Each survivor was led through scanning arches, beams passed over their bodies, numbers and symbols flashed across screens. Decisions were made in silence. Some were directed one way, some another. Families cried out as they were separated. Soldiers did not answer. They only obeyed orders. The builder held the arm of the elder to keep her from being pulled away, and for a moment it worked. The soldier glanced at his wrist screen, recalculated, then waved them through together. The messenger was dragged toward another corridor. He shouted that he would not leave. 2 soldiers lifted him off the ground like he weighed nothing. His voice echoed as he disappeared into the steel maze. The singer clutched the child close and begged in trembling tones, "Do not take her." The soldier scanned them both and kept them together. But the look through his visor was unreadable. The pilot limped forward under the grip of a guard, his broken frame scanned and flagged. He was pushed toward a chamber filled with medical equipment, his eyes wide with confusion. The elder whispered that perhaps this was the healing they had prayed for. But when the pilot looked back over his shoulder, he saw the others through a wall of glass. His mouth moved but no words reached them. And then the door sealed. The builder felt his stomach twist. He turned to the elder and asked what would happen to them. She shook her head. Storms never explain. Storms only take what they will. They were led into a vast chamber, rows of survivors already sitting on benches under the gaze of armed guards. A large screen flickered to life on the far wall. Symbols scrolled too quickly for the translator. Then a human voice, deep, steady. It spoke in harsh words that the translator tried to bend into their tongue. Civilians secured. Sector pacified. Occupation phase initiated. The words cut through every heart. The singer gasped, her hope finally breaking. Occupation, not protection. The messenger's warning echoed in their ears, though he was gone. The elder lowered her head, her voice trembling. "We are no longer free." The builder clenched his fists, staring at the glowing screen and the endless soldiers who surrounded them. He remembered the moment they had sent the desperate cry into the stars. Remembered the fragile hope in the singer's voice. Remembered the elder's warning, and now he understood. They had not summoned healers or allies. They had summoned rulers from a world of storms, and those rulers had come not to share mercy but to claim dominion. Outside the carrier's walls the fleet shifted again. Larger ships arriving from distant space, sealing the planet like a cage. Humanity had answered, but its answer was iron, fire, and control, and the small alien race realized that their plea had not saved them. It had delivered them into the hands of the Deathwelders. The chamber grew colder though no wind touched it. The survivors sat in silence, their faces pale under the harsh white lights. The soldiers stood like statues along the walls, their glowing visors giving no hint of thought or mercy. The young builder sat beside the elder and felt his heart pounding like a drum. He looked at the child in the singer's arms and wondered what future she would see. Above them the great screen flickered again. Lines of human language scrolled past too fast for the translator. Then new words formed, translated slowly into their tongue. Planetary control confirmed. Occupation authority established. Resistance will be eliminated. Compliance ensures survival. The singer gasped and pressed the child close. The messenger's empty place haunted them all. The pilot had not returned from the chamber where he was taken, and no one spoke of hope now. The elder raised her head, her eyes like stone. She whispered that the storm had come and storms do not leave. They remake the land they touch. The builder clenched his fists. His people had asked for aid. They had cried for mercy. And in return they had been claimed. The humans had destroyed the invaders with terrifying precision. But they had also stripped away freedom with the same steady hand. Outside the carrier's hull the fleet shifted again. Massive ships descending to the surface, their shadows covering entire valleys. Machines rolled out from their bellies. Towers rose where cities once stood. The planet itself was being reforged into a fortress, into a base of iron. Survivors were herded into camps, scanned, numbered, assigned, their names lost in codes and symbols. The singer whispered that at least the child would live. The elder answered quietly, "Yes, she will live, but she will live under them." And the builder felt the weight of that truth pressing like a mountain on his chest. In the distance new thunder shook the air. Not from battle now but from construction. The sound of a world being rewritten. The humans had not simply answered their cry, they had seized it, turned it into a chain, and wrapped it around the planet. The elder placed a hand on the builder's shoulder and said, "Remember this. Remember that when we begged for help it was not kindness that came but judgment. Storms do not heal, storms conquer, and these are storm people, deathworlders, who bring not open hands but closed fists." The builder's eyes burned as he watched the endless warships through the narrow window high on the wall. Their engines glowed like cold suns. They filled the sky so completely that stars could no longer be seen. His people had wanted to be saved, now they were owned. The singer rocked the child and whispered lullabies that no longer carried hope. The pilot's fate remained unknown. The messenger was gone. The elder's strength the only anchor in the sea of fear. The humans stood silent, their presence heavy, unshakable, unchallengeable. And in that moment the survivors finally understood the truth. Their desperate call across the stars had not brought salvation, it had summoned an empire. Humanity had answered not with healers, not with kindness, not with mercy, but with warships, with power, with domination. And as the fleet settled over their world like an endless night, the small race realized their cry had changed their destiny forever. They would live, yes, but they would live beneath the iron shadow of deathworlders who now ruled their sky, their land, and their future.